Hi, it's Miss Camp, and today I am by myself because yesterday Archie and I had a wonderful class. We got all finished, and then I realized I forgot to hit the record button, so it was not recorded. So today I am going to try to do the same class all over again, if I can remember. So it is just you who is listening to me and me. Let me go ahead and share the iPad screen with you. So here you can see some of what Archie and I did yesterday. I'm just going to go ahead and delete what we did and then remind you of what was the last thing that we talked about in the last class. We had talked about how Nick was being kind of funny. Nick was saying, Buzzy is a thief, so we will also be a thief. What's funny is that neither one of them are really being a thief, but he finds it funny. So he's saying that Buzzy is a thief because he takes too much money from people for the job that he does for them of raking their leaves. He thinks that Buzzy charges too much money. So in English, when someone charges too much money for a job and we think that how much money they are charging is unfair, we could say, oh, they are a thief. But they are not really a thief. Being a thief is stealing. It is taking something without another person's permission that does not belong to you. When people give Buzzy money, it is their choice. So Buzzy is not really a thief. But Nick is using that expression of his being a thief because Nick thinks that Buzzy charges too much money. And then when Nick says, that's why we are going to steal his business. Well, again, Nick and Daniel are not really stealing, but we have this expression in English about stealing someone's business. It's not really stealing. What happens is, let's say someone is a customer and they want to buy a product or a service. And then there are these two businesses that want to sell to that one customer their product or their service. Well, the customer is only going to buy it from one of them. So the two businesses are competing with each other. Both of them want the business of that one customer. So one of them might say, oh, choose me, pick me, pick me. It will be less money, or I will do a better job, or it will take less time. And then the customer will choose that business. The customer has to choose one business or the other business. And so the customer might choose the one that is going to charge less money or offer a better deal. Well, the one that gets the business stole the business from the other company, because now the other company isn't going to be able to do business with that customer because the customer did not pick them. Now, did this first company really steal the business? No, they just offered a better deal and they got picked. But the expression in English is that they stole the business from the other company because they are the ones who got picked. And so Daniel and Nick are thinking, we are going to offer a better deal, less money, less time, better job, and then the customer will pick us instead of Buzzy. So they are stealing Buzzy's business. So Buzzy will not get the business from that customer. So Nick is being funny because he is using two expressions about being a thief or about stealing, but neither one is really literally stealing. The other thing that we talked about with this, with what Nick said, is he's sounding like, since Buzzy did something wrong, we can do something wrong. And that's actually not a good way to look at it, right? Because we have this expression that says two wrongs don't make a right. If Buzzy does something wrong, that does not make it okay for Daniel and Nick to do something wrong. But it doesn't really matter, because in what Nick is saying, Buzzy's not actually doing something wrong. Maybe it's unfair, but it's not wrong. And Nick and Daniel are not actually doing something wrong. They are just competing for business. And then we had talked about how when Nick smiled like a fox, this was an example of a simile. And a simile is when we can see how two different things are similar. So we have these two different things. They're both nouns. Now, he is a pronoun, but it is taking the place of Nick, who is a person. So this is a noun. This is noun number one. With a simile, we use a second noun to help us understand something about the first noun. Now, to understand something about Nick, we have to understand what is the reputation of a fox. When we hear the word fox, what do we think of? Well, in a lot of English stories, especially old folk tales, the fox is always the character who is so tricky and clever, sly, sneaky. So if you're going to use a fox as the noun that is going to help us understand something about Nick, this is telling us that Nick is also being sneaky, tricky, clever, and sly. There is another type of simile also using as and as, but we have not seen that yet, and we will find that later in the book. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and start reading more in the story, and we will find out the name of the person who is telling the story. Now, the first thing we need to remember is that so far this is about Nick. So Nick is the one talking. Nick is the one smiling like a fox. So when it says, then he pushed Daniel, this he right here, we can tell is Nick. Because so far, we've been talking about Nick on this page. So Nick pushed Daniel into a leaf pile. Daniel turned and tackled Nick around the legs. So they are wrestling. They are wrestling in a big pile of leaves. Kids love to do this because a big pile of leaves is soft and fun to jump in and wrestle in. Naturally, I, the person telling the story, joined in. Joined in means jumped in to the wrestling in the big pile of leaves with the two brothers, Daniel and Nick. Then it says that was probably a mistake. What was probably a mistake? That. Well, let's talk about this word that for a minute. This is actually the subject of the sentence because the next word is the verb in the sentence. So we have our subject and then our verb. This word that is actually a pronoun. It is taking the place of a noun. So we need to figure out what noun is it taking the place of. That was probably a mistake. Well, we can always find out by asking the question, what? Because a noun answers the question, what? So what was probably a mistake? What just happened? Oh, this guy, the one telling us the story, the third kid in the picture, joined in. So what's happening here? What just happened? The third kid, the one telling the story, just jumped into the pile of leaves to wrestle with his brothers. So that is talking about what he just did, about the jumping in and joining them. And that was probably a mistake. Why? Because Daniel and Nick were stronger than me. Pretty soon, I was getting the worst of it. I felt like an ant at a square dance. Squish, squish, if you know what I mean. Well, let's think about this. A square dance is a dance that needs a lot of people and they are on a hardwood floor. Well, what would happen if a little ant was crawling across the floor that had a lot of people jumping up and down on it and moving around quickly and stepping all over the place? Well, that poor little ant would probably get squished. And that's the sound, squish, squish. So the person telling us the story is letting us know that in this big pile of leaves with his two brothers, he feels like an ant. He keeps getting squished and squashed and squished and stepped on. Why? Because the two brothers are stronger, which means they are probably bigger. We can look back at our picture now, and we can see that probably these two are Daniel and Nick, and probably this is the one telling us the story. We're getting more clues. Well, my mother came to the front door. My mother came to the front door. Theodore, she called, telephone for you. All right, let's think about this. We have a first person pronoun here, my. It's not in quotation marks, so this is talking about the person who's telling us the story. So that person's mother came to the front door. She yelled something. Who is she? She is the mother. And what did the mother say? The mother said, Theodore. Well, that's not the name of Daniel or Nick. So it's probably the name of the other kid. Theodore is a boy's name, so it would be the little brother. That would be the one telling us the story. Now, I suppose it's possible that it's the name of the dad, but let's keep reading just to make sure. Now, there's one more pronoun here. It says telephone for you. So you is the person she's talking to. So who is she talking to? Well, let's see what the answer is. Jigsaw's kind of busy, Mom, Nick answered gleefully. Gleefully means he's laughing and he finds this very funny. He's very happy. Now this is Nick talking. And Nick answers Mom by saying Jigsaw is busy. That's interesting because the mom did not say Jigsaw, the phone is for you. The mom said Theodore, the phone is for you. But then Nick said Jigsaw is busy. That sounds like Theodore and Jigsaw are two names of the same person. Theodore is the name used by the mom, and Jigsaw is the name or the nickname used by the brothers. A nickname many English names have nicknames. It's just a shorter form of the name. So for example, a nickname of Jonathan might be John or Johnny. A nickname of Stephen might be Steve. A nickname of Douglas is Doug. A nickname of Catherine is Kathy. A nickname of Elizabeth is Liz or Beth. a nickname of Theodore is Ted or Teddy. So a nickname might be a shorter form of the name, but a nickname could also be something completely different that's kind of silly. It might be something that the friends use. Theodore's brothers, Daniel and Nick, call him Jigsaw. We are going to learn about why they use the name Jigsaw in a few minutes. So right now we know that Nick just told us that the name they use for Theodore, the nickname they use, is Jigsaw. And Nick answers Mom by saying, "Sorry, Jigsaw is busy." And then Daniel adds to that and says, "Yeah," Daniel laughed, "we're making a scarecrow, and he's it." All right, let's think about who. We have a lot of pronouns here, so let's take a look at these. Well, first of all, we know that the mom was talking to Theodore, and we know that Theodore and Jigsaw are the same person. So when the mom said telephone for you, this you was Theodore and Jigsaw, two names of the same person. Okay, then we also have Nick and we have Daniel. And so when Daniel says we, that's going to include the person who's talking, which is Daniel, and his brother Nick. If we're using the pronoun we, it needs to include the person who is talking and at least one other person. And then it says he's it. Well, we have two pronouns here. One is he, and the other one is it. Well, they're talking about Jigsaw or Theodore. So he is also Jigsaw or Theodore. It is what they're making. What are they making? A scarecrow. So here the scarecrow that they are making is the it in this sentence. It was true. Daniel kneeled on my chest while Nick stuffed leaves under my shirt. So we have a clue here about Daniel and Nick. Daniel is kneeling on his chest and Nick is stuffing leaves. So Daniel on the chest. Let's take a look at the picture. So here we can see that the one on the ground is Theodore or Jigsaw. Daniel is kneeling on him and Nick is stuffing leaves into Jigsaw's clothes to turn him into a scarecrow. So Daniel looks like he has stripes on his shirt and Theodore is wearing a hat. All right, so we can go back, we can go to this page and see the stripes on the shirt. So this is Daniel, which means this is Nick, and this is Jigsaw wearing the hat. So now we know that Jigsaw is the youngest kid in the family, and he has 3 older brothers and an older sister. And Jigsaw is the one who is telling us the story. Well, the mom is going to respond. She says, "Stop fooling around, Theodore," my mom insisted. "It's a girl. She says she needs a detective." A detective. Well, this is interesting. The phone call is for Jigsaw, for that youngest kid in the family. And the reason she's calling is because she needs a detective. This tells us that Jigsaw is a detective in this story. Well, what is a detective? Here's a picture of a detective, although the top of the head is cut off, but we can see some interesting things in this picture about a detective. He's using binoculars to help him see. He has here a magnifying glass, and he has a notebook and a pencil. A detective is someone who solves mysteries. A mystery is when something happens and we have a lot of questions about it and we don't have the answers. We might have questions like, who did it? How did they do it? Why did they do it? And we don't know the answers. It is a mystery. So a detective is someone who will try to answer those questions, to solve the mystery. The detective is someone who is going to investigate. Investigate means to look for clues, to work on answering these questions. We can take this word investigate, which is a verb, and there's a few things we can do to it. We could change the E into an O, add an R, and it becomes the word investigator. And investigator is another word for a detective. We could also change the E to an I-O-N. And then you can see the T-I-O-N, shun, investigation. And investigation is what we call all of the work that the investigator or the detective is doing to solve the mystery. All of the clues they are looking for, their plan for how to look for clues. This is called their investigation. So another word for detective is an investigator. Investigator. So we now know that Jigsaw is a detective. Now, let's look at what the word jigsaw means. Here you can see the word jigsaw. This is a jigsaw puzzle. When you are putting a jigsaw puzzle together, you need to get all of these different pieces and see how they fit together. And as you fit all of those different pieces together, all of a sudden, a picture starts to show up. But before you get the pieces together, your puzzle might look like this. And you have lots of different pieces, but you don't really see how they all go together or what the big picture is. Here is another picture of a jigsaw puzzle, and you can see there is one missing piece. When we are doing a jigsaw puzzle, we are putting pieces together. And when we see how they fit, we can see the picture that shows up. It's a lot like being a detective. Every clue that they find is like a piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And as you start to put those clues together, you can see a picture emerging that starts to answer the questions for you of who did this and how did they do it and why did they do it. So Jigsaw is actually a good nickname for an investigator or a detective, because as they collect clues and start to put those clues together, it is a lot like taking pieces of a jigsaw puzzle and putting them together to see the picture that is emerging. My brothers let me up, though I could tell it broke their hearts. Well, let's talk about this for just a minute. Daniel and Nick let Jigsaw get up out of the pile of leaves, but it broke their hearts. Well, that is an interesting expression in English, because our heart is in our body, pumping blood all over our body so that we can have oxygen. It's a very important part of our body. If our heart stops working, we will die. We need our heart. So we don't want our heart to break, because then we would die. So what does this mean? Does it mean that Daniel and Nick just died? No. So it is an expression in English. Broke their hearts means they were disappointed. They had been having so much fun playing with Jigsaw in the pile of leaves and turning him into a scarecrow. They really did not want to let him up to go take a phone call. They wanted to keep playing. So they were disappointed about this. And that's what it means that it broke their hearts. Now we can say who this is. Yes, it is the person telling us the story, but now we know it is Jigsaw. I rose to my feet, crunch, crackle. A few leaves had found their way inside my boxer shorts. Boxer shorts is another word for a boy's underwear, the shorts that a boy can wear under his jeans or his pants. Well, remember that Daniel and Nick had been trying to stuff Jigsaw's clothes with leaves. And these are leaves that had fallen on the ground. Well, when a leaf is on a tree and it is green, there is water in that leaf that keeps it green and alive. And it's not going to be crunchy if you were to take a green leaf and crumple it in your hands, it would not be dry and crumbly. But when a leaf falls on the ground, it is no longer green. A lot of that water inside the leaf is gone. It is dry. And so if you put it in your hand and you crumple it or crunch it, it is going to make a crackling, crunching sound. And that is what Jigsaw has inside of his clothes. So as he's trying to walk, you can hear the crunch, crackle. I staggered to my mom. Staggered means you're having a little trouble walking. You're walking, but you almost kind of feel like you're going to fall over. Rustling and crackling with each step. The rustling and the crackling, that is the sound of the leaves getting all crumpled and crunchy. Thanks, I said. I'll take this call in my office. In my office? This boy has an office? I can't wait to find out where his office is. Well, we're going to be reading chapter 2 in our next class. This is called The Client, but we are going to learn just a little bit about Jigsaw's office. I climbed up to my tree house. Oh, so Jigsaw's office is in a tree house, 10 feet off the ground. Wow. Well, feet is not a word that we use in Taiwan. Mostly just the United States uses this word. 1 foot or 12 inches is about this long, this big, this long. 3 feet is about 1 meter. So we could say that 3 feet is almost 1 meter, not quite. Sometimes for meter, we can just put an M. That would be 3 feet. 10 feet would be a little bit more than 3 meters. 10 feet is taller than the tallest person, even the tallest basketball player. I don't know that a tall basketball player could even reach up with his hands 10 feet. So 10 feet is fairly high off the ground. And it was where, so the treehouse is where I, Jigsaw, did all my big thinking. And I noticed how this word big started with a capital B, and thinking started with a capital T. And we don't usually have a capital letter in the middle of a sentence unless it is the name of something. Well, Jigsaw has actually come up with a name for the kind of thinking that he does in the treehouse when he is working on a mystery, on a case. He calls it his big thinking. This is when he sits down and all of the other things in his mind, he just puts them aside and he only thinks about the case, about the clues that he has found and how all of those different clues or pieces, jigsaw pieces, fit together so that he can start to figure out the answers to the questions of the mystery. Who did it? How did they do it? Why did they do it? Now, we're reminded here in parentheses. Parentheses always come in two, one at the beginning and one at the end. We're reminded, crunch, crackle, that his clothes are still full of dry leaves because Daniel and Nick had been turning him into a scarecrow. And he spoke into the phone. Jigsaw Jones, private eye. Well, we're going to end here by trying to understand what is meant by private eye. You see this word eye? That's this eye on your face. You have two. What does he mean by saying he is a private eye? We are going to go back and take a look at what we were saying here about an investigator. Remember that an investigator is another word for a detective. So a detective is also called an investigator. It is the person who is going to look for clues to solve a mystery and answer these questions. Well, a detective or an investigator could work for someone like the police department or the FBI. The detective or the investigator might have a boss. If he works for the police department, the chief of police might say, here is the case I want you to work on. I want you to solve this mystery, answer these questions. But you can also decide to work for yourself and have your own private business where you are your own boss. You're not working for anyone else. You just have your own business and people can come to you and hire you. People can come to you and say, I have a mystery. Will you help me? Will you solve it for me? I will pay you money. Will you help me? And then you can decide if you want to take the case and work on that mystery. So you are your own boss. So if you have a private business and you're only working for yourself, then we say that you are a private investigator. Well, let's look at the first letter of the word investigator. It's this letter I right here. So instead of saying the long word investigator, we could just say I, private eye. But we have a word in English that sounds like I, and it is that thing on our face. We have two of them. We see through them. Each one is called an eye. And it sounds just like this I, which is the first letter of investigator. And so we can call a detective or an investigator that works for himself or herself, does not have a boss, has their own private business. We can say they are a private eye. And that is what Jigsaw is, because he tells us right here when he answers the phone, my name is Jigsaw Jones. Jones is the family name or the last name, and Jigsaw is his nickname instead of Theodore. He could say Theodore Jones, but he knows that his friends and his brothers, maybe everyone except for his mom, calls him Jigsaw, his nickname. So he answers the phone, Jigsaw Jones, private eye. And this tells us what he does for a job. Now we can tell by looking at the picture that he's a kid, so he must go to school, but he also has a little business of solving mysteries. And you can hire him, you can call him, And actually, he has a phone in the treehouse. So he can go up into the treehouse, his office, answer the phone, and say, Jigsaw Jones, private eye, how can I help you? And that is where we stopped yesterday. And I found out that I had not recorded our class. So I will stop here today. And I will say, on behalf of Archie and myself, so long, Cheddar Chip.